Yes, indeed, everybody. Welcome. It is the 9th edition of the Netcrashers Intermission, heard every single week around the world on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, netcrashers.ca, and YouTube. How are you, YouTube? Good to see you once again. Good to be on in your ocular nerves there.
Yeah, it's good to be back talking about hockey and talking
indeed.
to YouTube. Our 9th
Absolutely.
episode, doing the Netcrashers Intermission. And if you've been watching hockey at all this week, you knew that the axe fell in Ottawa on Paul Maclean.
Yes, indeed.
He was fired this week, and really, his team wasn't doing all that bad, but we know the management in Ottawa, they take exceptions to any kind of losing for any kind of extended stretch of time.
Absolutely. Of course, this is Reynolds. Reynolds in the house.
Holla.
I'm Leth. I'm in the house. Greener, not in the house. He will be back on episode 113. That's coming up this Sunday. We do have the Sens banner here, though, so he is here in spirit. As I said, Greener will be back on this week's show. But yes, Paul Maclean, the first coaching casualty so far of the season, and kind of inspiration for this week's topic for 2 Minute Minor, and it was sent in by Stephanie on the website, and Stephanie wanted us to know, who do we think the next casualty as far as coaches go in the NHL will be? And there's maybe not as many options as one would think, because there's a lot of first and second year coaches in the NHL. A lot of these bottom feeder teams like Carolina and the Florida Panthers have relatively new coaches, guys that probably aren't going to get the axe, because you know how the team is, what kind of state the team is in. They're in a position of developing and rebuilding. And but there are a couple of options out there. We're going to talk about a couple of them.
Yeah.
And I think we've got a couple of good choices, I think.
And what we've seen in the last couple of years in the NHL, and I think it's a trend, like we can probably extrapolate back even further than that, is when one coach is fired, that almost always precipitates more firings down the line.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
It's kind of,
It takes a while. You get to a certain point. This season, it was about the 30-game mark. You get your first firing. And then it just snowballs from there. So there's a couple guys. We're going to touch on them quick. We're going to touch on them in 2 Minute Mind. There's only two of us. So we'll split the time up evenly this week. We got two names, and we think you guys are going to agree.
Yes.
So why don't we get started? I can go first.
Yes, absolutely. It's the Who's Going to Be Fired Next Coach Edition here on the Netcrashers Intermission for 2 Minute Minor. And Reynolds, your time starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Since reaching the Stanley Cup Finals in 2012, a final in which they lost the Los Angeles Kings, head coach Peter DeBoer and the New Jersey Devils have been unable to reach the playoffs in 2 consecutive years, and this season they've amassed a record of 11, 15, and 5. The coach must be close to being on thin ice, as general manager Lou Lamoriello will want to live up to his reputation as being a builder of great hockey teams, but to be fair to DeBoer, he has been the victim of having to work with players who are well past their primes. After losing Kovalchuk to the KHL, the team has mostly brought in older players at the twilight of their careers, aside from obviously the acquisition of Corey Schneider. If DeBoer misses the playoffs this year, I have a feeling he will definitely be fired, and if so, it will be a history repeating itself, as he was fired after his third year as head coach in Florida after missing the playoffs in 3 straight seasons. Despite this, there's every possibility the axe falls on DeBoer before the season ends, especially when you consider that Paul Maclean firing makes it easier for GMs in the league to get rid of coaches who still maintain somewhat respectable win-loss records, and coaches who have coaching accolades to their credit.
And when the Arizona Coyotes were the Phoenix Coyotes, Dave Tippett was one of the best things that ever happened to that team. He completely revolutionized the team's playing style and helped them to the Western Conference Final just 3 years ago. Now, he's just the coach of a 28th place team. Yes, the Yotes, they're off to a horrible start this year with just 10 wins in 30 games, 24 points total on this season. And it's clear that somewhere along the lines, Tippett's defensive-first system has been lost on the team, because starting goaltender Mike Smith, a former Olympian, currently sits with just 5 wins on the year and a save percentage under .890. Horrible numbers. To be sure, the team's general manager, Don Maloney, he's made some mistakes in building this team, going for grit over skill. The majority of the time, it certainly seems like. But the fact that the team is bottom 5 in the NHL in just about every imaginable category is going to fall at the feet of Dave Tippett. I would not be surprised to see him get the axe at the next month or so, especially with the tough Pacific Division as it is. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Touchdown, Lethbridge.
We did it just under the garage door, sliding under Arnold Schwarzenegger style and Jingle All the Way.
The horn was still sounding.
Yes,
right?
for sure. It still counts. But yeah, I think those are two guys that I think maybe
very similar in the kind of in the situation they find themselves in. You talked about the Coyotes and Dave Tippett reaching the Western Conference Finals.
Could have easily been playing the Devils and Peter DeBoer.
It was the same year that the Devils went all to the finals. They lost to the Kings 4-2 in that series.
Might have won that series if it had been against the Phoenix Coyotes. Although the way Mike Smith was playing, you never know.
You never know, but the way they could. I think. You mean they could have
would have been a much closer
Phoenix
series
Coyotes.
if it was Phoenix, if it was New Jersey instead of L.A. and New Jersey.
Well, that year the Kings were setting all kinds of playoff records
They
for their
were
ability to win on the road.
A team of destiny, almost. I mean,
really, they were.
Yeah, for sure.
Coming out of the 8 seed, the only 8 seed ever to win the Stanley Cup. But I mean, these guys, I believe Tippett won Coach of the Year.
Yeah, he did
that year.
Absolutely. Now you bring up Peter DeBoer. And you bring up Lou Lamoriello. Lamoriello, the longest tenured general manager in the NHL, being with the New Jersey Devils since, I believe, 1987. For the entirety of our lives, he's been with the New Jersey Devils. And he's been a guy that has seen many, many head coaches come and go, but he's managed to stay there just the same. And you got to wonder, at what point does the team's failings, because this is about as bad as the New Jersey Devils have been in our lifetime, as of right now.
Looking at 3 straight years, finishing out of the playoffs. That's unheard of for the New Jersey Devils in the last 25 years.
Absolutely, for sure. You got to wonder, when does that actually turn around and become a problem for Lou Lamoriello instead of Peter DeBoer? Now, I don't think Peter DeBoer is long for the New Jersey Devils. A lot of people were saying that even last year. But, it's maybe something to think about. And perhaps the same goes for Don Maloney, because at the end of the day, Dave Tippett can only work with what he's been given. And on the whole, aside from a couple of gifted offensive defensemen like Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Keith Yandel, and a couple of guys up front who have kind of blossomed into pretty solid players, Mikhail Bogker.
Martin Hansel's a great player for the Phoenix Coyotes, but Shane Doan, he's on the way out. There's no doubt about that.
By and large, it's a pretty underwhelming roster in Phoenix.
It is.
It's a pretty below average lineup of players, in my opinion.
It's been like that for a long time. But over the last 2 seasons, we saw something in Phoenix. We saw them lose their identity.
Yep.
They were known as a defensively minded, defensively capable team when they made it to the Western Conference Finals. Mike Smith,
very stingy
being
defensive team,
the cornerstone of that defense. But now he's been wishy-washy.
Yep.
Who's it? Devin Dubnyk is even being. He's been.
They have the same amount of wins on the season. They've got 5 each,
and he's looked a lot better in more games than Mike Smith has.
Mm-hmm.
So
like
far,
I said, Mike Smith,
far in the season, and Devin Dubnyk just free agent acquisition.
Mike
for
Smith,
the team.
Mike Smith, .889 save percentage on the year, just ridiculous considering the year that they went to the Western Conference Final. It was somewhere north of .930, I believe.
It was almost It was between .930 and .940.
Yeah.
It was, and I think closer to .940.
Mm-hmm. It was just remarkable
especially
goaltending performance
in
that
the
year.
second half of that year was unbelievable. One of the best goaltending performances in half a season that I've ever seen.
Yeah,
just not the case anymore. But both these guys, they have the similar track record, and they're given teams that just can't score offensively.
Yeah.
We saw Lou Lamoriello make a great deal getting Corey Schneider.
Yeah,
but the defensive core,
no, not there.
It's just not there. Adam Larson, another victim of the mumps that's going through the NHL right now.
Besides that, a guy who was a very high draft pick, I believe a 4th overall draft pick for the New Jersey Devils, and a guy that has not developed.
No, he hasn't. He hasn't panned out the same way Oliver Ekman-Larsson has. I mean, for Phoenix and Victor Hedman is the Swedish defenseman of the future
absolutely.
in the NHL.
Well, a lot of people drew a lot of comparisons between Victor Hedman and Adam Larson. Similar physical stature, similar play style, great two-way players, and similar pedigree as far as the Swedish national junior team is concerned. But just has not panned out that way. And a couple of guys I think that could definitely be headed for a pink slip is Dave Tippett and Pete DeBoer. I think another guy maybe a low hanging fruit, but Dallas Eakins in Edmonton, just because something has to go, something has got to give in Edmonton.
And I think the reason we didn't talk about Dallas Eakins is the Oilers have said it; they don't want to fire him. I don't know I don't know if anything is ever going to give with this franchise, but we're talking about guys who the GMs, hey man, it's not unheard of for them to make a move, for them to take somebody out.
Well, if you look at,
but I think for some reason Dallas Eakins just has a longer leash. He has less of a track record. He had last year, and now he has this year. So overall, it's about 100 games to his credit.
Yeah.
He's still given some time to prove himself, but if he doesn't turn it around at all this season, he could very well be gone at the end of the season.
Well, I mean, you look at Bill Peters, Carolina, first-year head coach, and we all know what's going to be what's happening there, and they're basically in the middle of a rebuild. Voluntary or not, they are rebuilding. That team is. You look at Gerard Gallant in Florida, another team that constantly rebuilding, and you got to think he's going to get a couple of years out of that. And then you look even further down the list. I mean, a guy like Paul Maurice. I mean, Winnipeg have played pretty solid this year. Paul Maurice, maybe not so much the fact that he came in midway through last season, but if the Jets had played any poorer, maybe he would have been a guy that you would have thought. So Todd Richards, maybe if the Blue Jackets hadn't been able to turn it around, but obviously we know the Blue Jackets victims of injury, major victims of the injury bug so far this season.
Yeah, and they've had a great record over their last 10 games.
And looking at the bottom of the standings elsewhere, I mean, Ted Nolan in Buffalo, he's a part of that rebuild. Patrick Waugh's not getting let go in Colorado. Absolutely not. And I given the success of Claude Julien in the past, I don't see him. I see Peter Chiarelli giving him a real chance to turn things around in Boston, because they're still above 500. They're still, and there are a couple of players getting going away from really starting the climb back up the hill.
And for the Boston Bruins, Chara's finally back in the lineup.
Yeah.
And we know he's not up to speed as of the date we record this episode. He's taking some time to get back, like you would coming back from an injury that kept you out for, the first quarter of the regular season. Everybody takes a bit of an adjustment period. I mean, we saw Sidney Crosby when he came back. Yeah. He was the first to admit he didn't have the legs for it. He wasn't in shape when he first came back from that concussion, which caused him to miss the better part of 2 seasons. Yeah. So just a matter of time before Boston gets going. We know they have the goaltending to do it, and they have the forward core when they're productive. And Krejci is back in the lineup now, and he's just about a point per game. So it's going to come together. But for the Devils and for the Coyotes, the axe fell on Maclean. Now it makes it easier for those GMs to do what they have to do.
Exactly.
You just got to think. Coaches out there are a few out there that could turn some heads.
I mean, people still say Dan Bylsma, still out there, but I to me, it seems like Dan Bylsma, like a coach of that caliber, does not sit on the sidelines for as long as he has without that kind of maybe being his choice. Like maybe he doesn't want to be coaching right now. You know what I mean? You'd think that he would be hired by some team.
He wouldn't. He could have been hired by now.
Yeah.
He's a guy. I mean, Peter DeBoer, he was fired by Florida, and before the next season started, he was hired by the New Jersey Devils. Yeah. Dan Bylsma. I mean, look at the track record he had in Pittsburgh. It was unbelievable.
Winning the Stanley Cup his first season as a coach.
Exactly.
A multi-time coach of the U.S. national team.
Perhaps he's waiting for the ideal situation.
Maybe.
He wants to come in after a coach is fired after a regular season and have time to implement his systems.
Exactly.
It shows, I mean, it's great for a coach who can walk in and make an effect on a franchise. Ken Hitchcock is the guy who did it in St. Louis most recently.
Absolutely. Winning the Jack Adams Trophy in that same year.
Coming in, mid-season or a bit before mid-season and completely turning around that team into what it is today.
For sure.
And the management in St. Louis, a lot of that credit is due to them as well.
For sure.
But these two guys on thin ice right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. For sure. And that does bring to an end the 9th intermission for the Netcrashers Hockey Podcast. We will have episode 113 with all hands back on deck coming up this Monday. So make sure you tune in. And then next week's, the 10th intermission, going to have some special holiday treats for you because that will actually be releasing on Christmas Day. So make sure you do tune in for that. Maybe after you're recovering from some turkey or some gift giving, gift unwrapping, and of course Christmas Eve, another holiday treat for you as Netcrasher Murph will have the 3rd installment of the Netcrashers Ice Picks top 5 plays of December. So make sure you do tune in for that as well. And I guess with that said, we are wrapping things up. We're all done for another week, and we thank you so much for tuning in. Reynolds going to let you know how to find us online.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in to our abbreviated intermission this week.
Netcrashers, the chirp of the week will be back next week also, should mention.
So hashtag Netcrashers chirp. Get your chirps in on Twitter at Netcrashers is the way to do it. You find us online. The best place to do it is netcrashers.ca. That's our website.
Yep.
That's the home base to all things Netcrashers. Check us out on iTunes. You can listen to the podcast on our website, or you can go over to iTunes and also hear it on Stitcher Radio. If you use either of those services, please rate and review. And if you use Stitcher, use the promo code Netcrashers when you sign up.
Yep.
You can also hear us, as you said, on Facebook. The group on Facebook, it's Netcrashers Hockey Podcast. Find us. Everything we put out is on Facebook. It's an easy place. If you want to have all your feeds consolidated into one spot that shows up all the time for you, Facebook's the way to do it.
There you go.
And YouTube, check out Ice Picks coming up soon. You can also check out November, October.
Yes, sir.
If you're wondering the best play of every month, you'll be able to check and see it in Ice Picks, brought to you by Murph, the unofficial fourth Netcrasher.
The
Murph.
fifth Beatle, kind of. He's our George Martin.
He's our George Martin.
Bet you didn't know that we were music aficionados as well. I think that's probably common knowledge. George Martin. I think so.
Yeah. He's a producer of the ages.
Not only a great music producer, but a great author of those Game of Thrones books. Incredible.
Same guy.
Same guy.
And the way to get in touch with your hashtag Netcrashers Chirp, with your 2-minute minor topics, with your topics you want to hear us talk about in the intermission, at Netcrashers on Twitter is the way to do it. Remember, hashtag Netcrashers Chirp. Fire them in.
Yes, indeed.
Either toward us or toward... It doesn't matter if it's toward anyone.
Like it was last week with Brendan McQuillan. He had a chirp from his own life that he sent in. That was fantastic. Do that. That's another option for you.
Netcrashers, you can submit on Twitter at Netcrashers or netcrashers.ca.
Yes, indeed.
And I am at Jeremy_Reynolds. Stephen Green is not here. He'll be back next week. He is at NL Greener. And Leth, tell him how to get in touch.
Also on Twitter, at Stephen Leth, STPHENLETH. Hashtag submit your questions for 2-minute minor as well, netcrashers.ca. It's a really long hashtag. And until this Sunday, or until this Monday, with episode 113, we will leave you with a hearty lace 'em up.
Thanks for tuning in to Netcrashers Intermission number 9. Be sure to head over to netcrashers.ca to find everything Netcrashers related. Go to the YouTube channel, check out Murph's Ice Picks. Next week, it's coming out on Christmas Eve, and our next intermission is coming out on Christmas Day, next Thursday. So we're going to try and bring you some special festive cheer for that episode. That's number 10. With that being said, hope you tune in again. Thanks for tuning in now, and lace 'em up.